Silent curse. Lysara Rathmore had always been told not to listen when the forest whispered. But the night she did, the air shifted. The torches burned silver. The scent of pine and blood curled around her. And then he stepped forward golden-eyed, broad-shouldered, his voice dark as the storm rolling in behind him. "You were never meant to be one of them," he murmured. "And now, you will fight beside me." Chapter 1. The Whispers of Hollowfong Forest. The wind, a restless spirit itself, howled a mournful ballad through the ancient pines of Hollowfong Forest. Lysara Rathmore, her silver hair braided tightly against the chill, pulled her worn woolen shawl closer, its familiar scent of wood smoke and lavender a small comfort against the encroaching unease. 62 years she had lived on the edge of this forest. 62 years she had been warned of its dangers, its secrets, its whispers. Tonight, though, the whispers were different. They weren't the usual rustling of leaves, the creaking of branches, the distant hoot of an owl. These were voices, almost discernible, weaving through the natural sounds like threads of silver in a tapestry of darkness. Lysara had always prided herself on her practicality, her grounded nature. A widow for 10 long years, she had learned to rely on herself, on the rhythm of her days, tending her herb garden, brewing her remedies, offering a quiet, healing presence to the villagers of Oakhaven. But the forest had always held a strange pull, a resonance that vibrated deep within her bones. Her late husband, Thomas, a man of science and reason, had dismissed it as fanciful notions, the product of an overactive imagination fueled by old wives' tales. He had loved her practicality, her steady hand, her unwavering calm. But he had never understood the tremor in her soul when the wind shifted just so, carrying the scent of something wild and untamed. Lysara paused at the edge of her garden, the last rays of the setting sun painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and fading gold. The air grew thick, heavy with a strange, almost metallic tang. She could feel the hairs on her arms prickle, a primal instinct screaming at her to turn back, to seek the safety of her sturdy stone cottage, with its thick oak door and tightly shuttered windows. "Foolishness," she muttered, her voice a mere breath against the rising wind. Just the wind playing tricks. But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were a lie. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, weaving themselves around her name, a sibilant chorus that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the forest. Lysara, she had spent her life denying this part of herself, the part that yearned for something more, something other. The part that felt a kinship with the wildness of the forest, with the creatures that roamed its shadowed depths. Her grandmother, a woman steeped in the old ways, had warned her about it. "The forest calls to those who carry the old blood, Lysara," she had said, her voice raspy with age and knowing. "But you must resist. It is a dangerous path, a path of sorrow and loss." Lysara had heeded her grandmother's warning, burying her instincts, her intuition, deep within her heart. She had married a good man, a sensible man, and built a life of quiet contentment. But Thomas was gone now, and the whispers were growing stronger, beckoning her with a force she could no longer ignore. Taking a deep, unsteady breath, Lysara stepped off the well-worn path and into the encroaching darkness of the forest. The trees loomed above her, their branches intertwined like skeletal fingers, blocking out the last vestiges of daylight. The air grew colder, the scent of pine needles and damp earth intensified, mingled with that strange, metallic tang that made her stomach clench. She walked deeper, drawn by an invisible force, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The whispers continued, swirling around her, guiding her, urging her onward. She felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration, a sense of dread and anticipation that warred within her. The forest floor was soft beneath her feet, a carpet of fallen leaves and decaying wood. The sounds of the village faded behind her, replaced by the rustling of unseen creatures, the snap of a twig, the distant howl of something. Something that sent a shiver of both terror and something else entirely down her spine. She stopped abruptly at a pool. It seemed to be black water and was circular as if crafted by a giant. Around it the trees were thick, creating an enclosed and sheltered alcove of earth and leaf. Suddenly, the wind ceased. The whisper stopped. An unnatural stillness descended upon the forest, a silence so profound it felt like a physical pressure against her ears. Lasara held her breath, her senses on high alert. She felt it before she saw it, a shift in the air, a change in the energy, a presence that made every nerve ending in her body hum with a mixture of fear and recognition. She wasn't alone, and whatever was here was immensely powerful. The surface of the ink-black pool rippled. Chapter 2. A silver-tinged twilight. The ripple spread, disturbing the perfect stillness of the water, reflecting the darkening sky like a shattered mirror. Lasara's hand instinctively went to the small, silver locket she wore around her neck, a gift from Thomas on their wedding day. It contained a miniature portrait of him, his kind eyes and gentle smile a stark contrast to the growing unease that coiled in her stomach. She clutched it tightly, drawing a small measure of comfort from its familiar weight. Then the air shifted. It wasn't a gust of wind, but a palpable change in pressure, as if the very atmosphere had thickened, become charged with an unseen energy. The torches that lined the path leading back to her cottage, usually burning with a warm, orange glow, flickered and flared, their flames turning a strange, ethereal silver. Lasara gasped, her breath catching in her throat. This wasn't natural. This was something else entirely. The metallic tang in the air intensified, now undeniably the scent of blood, mingled with the sharp, clean scent of pine and something animalistic. Musky. Wild. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the forest. She wanted to run, to flee back to the safety of her home, but her feet felt rooted to the spot, held captive by an unseen force. Fear warred with a strange, compelling curiosity, a pull towards the unknown that she had spent her entire life suppressing. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her gaze from the rippling water to the edge of the clearing. And she saw him. He emerged from the shadows like a creature born of the twilight, his form indistinct at first, a mere silhouette against the darkening trees. But as he stepped closer, into the faint, silver-tinged light, Lasara could see him more clearly. He was tall, powerfully built, with broad shoulders and a presence that radiated both strength and a deep, unsettling intensity. His hair was the color of raven's wings, thick and slightly unruly, framing a face that was both strikingly handsome and undeniably dangerous. High cheekbones, a strong jawline, and a mouth that seemed carved from granite. But it was his eyes that held her captive. They were the color of molten gold, luminous and intense, burning with an inner fire that seemed to pierce through her very soul. They were the eyes of a predator, sharp and watchful, yet they also held a hint of something else, a flicker of sadness, a hint of vulnerability that belied his formidable appearance. He moved with a fluid grace, an almost animalistic elegance that spoke of power held in check, of a wildness barely contained. He wore dark clothing, a leather jerkin, close-fitting trousers, and boots that seemed to absorb the faint light, making him appear even more like a creature of shadow. He stopped a few feet away from her, his golden eyes fixed on hers, holding her gaze with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the frantic beating of her heart. Lasara felt a strange tremor run through her, a sensation she hadn't experienced in decades. It wasn't just fear, although that was certainly present. It was something else, a recognition, a sense of inevitability, as if this moment had been destined to happen, written in the stars long ago. Finally, he spoke, his voice a low, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. It was a voice that spoke of ancient forests and moonlit nights, of wildness and untamed power. "You heard the whispers," he said, his voice not accusing, but stating a simple fact. It wasn't a question. Lasara swallowed hard, her throat dry. She tried to speak, to deny it, to cling to her lifelong rationality, but the words wouldn't come. All she could do was nod, a small, almost imperceptible movement. He took a step closer, his golden eyes never leaving hers. Most ignore them. Most are afraid. Another step. The scent of him intensified: pine, earth, and that underlying, musky scent that sent a shiver of both apprehension and something else, something akin to attraction, down her spine. But you came. Lasara finally found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. I don't understand. He tilted his head slightly, a flicker of something that might have been amusement crossing his features. You will. The silver light from the torches seemed to intensify, illuminating his face more clearly. Lasara saw a faint scar that ran along his jawline, a testament to some past battle, some hidden pain. It only added to his dangerous allure. Who are you? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. He paused, his golden eyes searching hers, as if weighing her, assessing her. Then he gave a slight, almost imperceptible bow. They call me Kalen, he said, keeping the cryptic air of the holophone. The way he holds himself, the tone of his voice. They screamed dominance, confidence. And then she notices, on his left hand, a silver ring. And a sudden, almost electric jolt went through her, as though the ring was the source of the forest's whispers. Chapter 3. The Scent of Pine and Blood. The silver ring on Kalen's hand caught the strange, ethereal light, glinting with an almost otherworldly luminescence. It was a simple band, yet intricately crafted, with a design that seemed both ancient and strangely familiar. Lasara felt a sudden, inexplicable pull towards it, a resonance that echoed the whispers of the forest, the strange shift in the air, the silver-tinged flames of the torches. It was the same design that was etched, albeit faded, onto the old wooden chest in her attic. A chest she hadn't opened in decades, a chest that had belonged to her grandmother. Holophong, she whispered, the name a question and a statement all in one. It was a name whispered in legends, in hushed tones around crackling fires, a name associated with the wild heart of the forest, with creatures of myth and shadow. A name synonymous with werewolves. Kalen's golden eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his features. He seemed to study her, to gauge her reaction, to see if she understood the weight of his words, the implications of his lineage. You know the stories, he said, his voice still low and resonant, a rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath her feet. It wasn't an accusation, but an observation, a recognition of the shared history, the unspoken lore that permeated the very air of Oakhaven and its surrounding lands. Lasara nodded slowly, her mind racing. She had heard the tales, of course. Everyone in Oakhaven had. Tales of the Holophong, a pack of werewolves said to roam the deepest parts of the forest, creatures of immense power and untamed savagery, bound by ancient laws and a fierce loyalty to their own. Tales dismissed as folklore, as bedtime stories to frighten children, as remnants of a superstitious past. But looking at Kalen, standing before her in the silver-tinged twilight, the scent of pine and blood clinging to him like a second skin, she knew that the stories were more than just stories. They were a warning. And a truth. They say you are different, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't bring herself to say the word werewolf, as if uttering it aloud would somehow make it more real, more dangerous. A flicker of something that might have been pain crossed Kalen's features, quickly masked by his usual stoic expression. Different? He echoed, his voice laced with a hint of bitterness. We are what we are. Shaped by the moon, bound by the blood, cursed by fate. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming, his golden eyes burning into hers. Lasara felt a tremor of fear, but it was mixed with a strange, undeniable fascination. She had spent her life avoiding the unknown, embracing the safety of the familiar, but now, confronted with the reality of the Holophong, she felt a spark of something long dormant within her ignite. Why are you here? She asked, her voice gaining a bit of strength, fueled by a surge of adrenaline and a desperate need to understand. Why me? Kalen's gaze softened slightly, a hint of vulnerability flickering in his eyes. He looked away for a moment, towards the rippling surface of the pool, as if searching for answers in its dark depths. "The whispers," he said finally, his voice low and laced with a hint of sadness. "They led me to you. They said you were the key." "The key?" Lasara repeated, confusion clouding her mind. "The key to what?" He turned back to her, his golden eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "To ending this," he said, his voice heavy with a weariness that seemed to belie his formidable appearance. "To breaking the cycle. To stopping the war."
Va?
Lasara's heart pounded against her ribs. The stories had spoken of the Hollowfang's power, their wildness, but they had never mentioned a war. Kalen nodded, his expression grim. "A war that has been raging for centuries," he said. "A war between our kind and others. A war that threatens to consume everything." He gestured towards the silver ring on his hand. This is a symbol of our lineage, of our burden. It is also a conduit. It amplifies the whispers, allows us to communicate with those who are connected." Lasara's hand instinctively went to her silver locket, the one containing Thomas's portrait. She felt a strange tingling sensation, a warmth spreading through her chest.
"Connected?"
she asked, her voice trembling. "Connected how?" Kalen took another step closer, his proximity sending a shiver of both fear and something else entirely down her spine. He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from her face, his fingers brushing lightly against the silver locket. "Connected by blood," he said, his voice a mere breath against her ear. "Connected by destiny. Connected to me." And then, she could feel the pull, as the ring and locket seemed to vibrate in sync. The scent of the man intensified. The torches flared, casting a blinding light. Chapter 4. Echoes of a Forgotten Promise. The silver light intensified, bathing the clearing in an ethereal glow. Lasara felt a jolt, a surge of energy that seemed to flow from Kalen's touch, through the locket, and into her very being. It wasn't painful, but it was unsettling, disorienting, as if a long-dormant part of her was suddenly awakening. Images flashed through her mind, fragmented and fleeting. A moonlit forest, a silver wolf howling at the sky, a woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. A whispered promise. The images vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving her breathless and disoriented. She stumbled back a step, breaking the contact between Kalen's hand and her locket. The silver light subsided, the torches returning to their normal, flickering flames, although tinged with a residual silver hue. Kalen watched her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of concern and something else. Something that looked like hope. What was that? Lasara asked, her voice trembling, her hand still clutching the locket, as if it were a lifeline. He took a deep breath, his expression guarded. "A glimpse," he said. "A memory not yours, but echoing through you." "Whose memory?" He hesitated, his gaze shifting towards the forest, as if listening for something or someone. "Your grandmother's," he said finally, his voice low and laced with a hint of reverence. "Alara." The name struck a chord, a deep resonance within Lasara's soul. Alara. Her grandmother, the woman who had warned her about the forest, about the old blood, about the dangers of the whispers. The woman who had given her the old wooden chest, the one with the same carving as Kalen's ring. What did she promise? Lasara asked, her voice barely a whisper, her mind reeling with the implications of what she was hearing, of what she was feeling. Kalen stepped closer, his presence both comforting and intimidating. "She promised to help us," he said. "To help end the war. To break the curse." "The curse?" Lasara repeated, the words sending a shiver down her spine. The stories had spoken of the Hollowfang's power, their wildness, but they had also spoken of a curse, a burden that bound them to the moon, to the shadows, to a life of constant struggle. Kalen nodded, his expression grim. "A curse that has plagued our kind for centuries," he said. "A curse that forces us to transform, to lose control, to become beasts." He clenched his fist, the silver ring on his hand glinting in the faint light. A curse that has led to countless deaths, to endless suffering. Lasara looked at him, at the pain etched on his face, at the weariness in his eyes, and she felt a surge of empathy, a deep understanding that transcended her fear. She had lived a life of quiet grief, of hidden longing, and she recognized that same pain in him, amplified 1,000-fold by the burden of his curse. "And you think I can help?" she asked, her voice filled with doubt, but also with a flicker of hope. She, a simple herbalist, a widow living a quiet life on the edge of a haunted forest? How could she possibly help end a centuries-old war, break a powerful curse? Kalen's gaze softened, a hint of warmth returning to his golden eyes. "Your grandmother believed you could," he said. "And I believe it too." He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch surprisingly gentle, his skin warm against hers. Lasara felt another jolt, a milder version of the one she had experienced earlier, but this time it was comforting, reassuring. "The old blood runs strong in you, Lasara," he said, his voice a low murmur. "You have the power to heal, to soothe, to connect. You have the power to bridge the gap between our worlds." Lasara looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast between his strong, calloused hand and her own, smaller, more delicate one. She felt a strange sense of rightness, a feeling that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, despite the overwhelming reality of what she was facing. I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Kalen squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to do anything right now," he said. "Just listen. Listen to the whispers. Listen to your heart. And trust me." Trust him. A werewolf, a creature of myth and legend, a being she had been taught to fear her entire life. It seemed impossible, insane, yet looking into his golden eyes, she felt a flicker of trust, a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could do this. Maybe she could help him. Maybe she could help herself. The pool began rippling, the breeze changed, and the torches flared once more. A wolf howled in the distance. Kalen tightened his grip on her hand, his eyes hardening slightly. "They're coming," he whispered urgently. Chapter 5. The Golden-Eyed Stranger. "They're coming," Kalen whispered, his voice urgent, his golden eyes scanning the edges of the clearing. The distant howl of a wolf, closer now, sent a shiver of primal fear down Lasara's spine. She instinctively moved closer to Kalen, seeking the protection of his formidable presence. "Who's coming?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, her heart pounding against her ribs. He didn't answer immediately, his senses on high alert, his body tense and ready for action. He released her hand, but only to place himself between her and the direction of the approaching sounds. The air grew thick with anticipation, the scent of pine and blood mingling with a new, acrid odor, the smell of fear. Not hers, but something else, something wild and uncontrolled. "Hunters," he said finally, his voice grim, his jaw set in a hard line. "They've been tracking us for weeks." Hunters. Lasara's mind raced. She had heard rumors of them, of course. Men who hunted werewolves, not for sport, but for extermination. Men driven by fear, by hatred, by a desire to eradicate what they didn't understand. Men who saw the Holofong as monsters, as a threat to their way of life. She looked at Kalen, at the tension in his shoulders, at the fierce determination in his eyes, and she knew that he was prepared to fight, to defend himself, to defend her. "We need to go," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Now." He reached for her hand again, but before his fingers could close around hers, a figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the silver-tinged light of the clearing. It was a man, tall and lean, dressed in dark, practical clothing, similar to Kalen's, but with a harder, more ruthless edge. He carried a crossbow, the weapon loaded and aimed directly at Kalen. Well, the man said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "Look what we have here. The alpha of the Holofong and his little pet." Lasara bristled at the insult, but Kalen remained calm, his golden eyes fixed on the hunter, his body poised for action. Bastion, Kalen said, his voice devoid of emotion, a cold, hard edge to it that sent a chill down Lasara's spine. I should have known it was you. Bastion chuckled, a harsh, humorless sound. Did you think you could hide forever, Kalen? Did you think you could escape justice? Justice? Kalen repeated, a flicker of anger crossing his features. Your kind calls it justice. We call it genocide. You are monsters, Bastion spat, his finger tightening on the trigger of the crossbow. Abominations. You deserve to be wiped from the face of the earth. Lasara felt a surge of anger, a fierce protectiveness towards Kalen that surprised even her. She stepped forward, placing herself between him and the hunter, despite the obvious danger. He's not a monster, she said, her voice trembling but firm. She hesitated, searching for the right words. He's trying to help. He's trying to end the violence. Bastion laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. You're deluded, old woman, he said. He's a beast. He'll turn on you the moment the moon is full. That's not true, Lasara insisted, her voice gaining strength. She looked at Kalen, her eyes pleading with him to say something, to prove the hunter wrong. Kalen remained silent, his golden eyes fixed on Bastion, his body still tense and ready for action. He knew that words were useless against such ingrained hatred, such blind fear. Step aside, woman, Bastion ordered, his voice hardening. This is between me and him. Lasara refused to move.
No, she said.
I won't let you hurt him. Bastion's eyes narrowed. You're protecting him? He asked, incredulity lacing his voice. You're protecting a wolf? Before Lasara could answer, another figure emerged from the shadows, and then another, and another. Soon, the clearing was surrounded by hunters, all armed with crossbows, their faces grim, their eyes filled with hatred. Lasara felt a surge of despair. They were outnumbered, surrounded, trapped. There was no way out. Kalen placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring, his presence a shield against the overwhelming threat. It's all right, he whispered, his voice calm, despite the desperate situation. I won't let them hurt you. He stepped forward, facing the hunters, his golden eyes blazing with defiance. This ends now, he said, his voice ringing with authority, with the power of an alpha, with the ancient strength of the hollow fang. And then with an almost feral speed, he shifted. Chapter 6. Between Two Worlds. The transformation was instantaneous, breathtaking, and terrifying. One moment, Kalen stood there, a man of formidable presence the next, a magnificent wolf, larger than any Lasara had ever seen, stood in his place. His fur was the color of midnight, thick and lustrous, rippling with muscle and power. His eyes, still the same molten gold, now glowed with an even more intense, primal fire. Lasara gasped, taking an involuntary step back, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had known, intellectually, that he was a werewolf, but seeing the transformation firsthand, witnessing the raw power and untamed wildness of his wolf form, was a completely different experience. The hunters, however, were unfazed. They had seen this before. They were prepared. They raised their crossbows, their fingers tightening on the triggers, their faces grim and determined. Bastion, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and grim satisfaction, took aim. Goodbye, monster, he sneered. But before he could release the bolt, Kalen moved. He lunged forward with incredible speed, a blur of black fur and flashing teeth, knocking Bastion to the ground, sending his crossbow flying. The other hunters reacted instantly, firing their bolts, but Kalen was too fast, too agile. He dodged and weaved, a whirlwind of motion, snapping at the hunters, forcing them back, preventing them from getting a clear shot. Lasara watched in stunned silence, her mind struggling to reconcile the two images of Kalen, the man, with his quiet intensity and hidden vulnerability, and the wolf, a creature of raw power and untamed ferocity. She felt a strange mixture of fear and admiration. The fight was brutal and swift. Kalen, despite being outnumbered, was clearly the superior fighter. He moved with a primal grace, an instinctive knowledge of how to use his strength and speed to his advantage. He didn't kill, but he incapacitated, disarming the hunters, knocking them unconscious, leaving them bruised and battered but alive. Lasara realized that he was holding back, deliberately avoiding lethal force. He was a predator, a creature capable of immense destruction, but he was choosing not to kill. He was fighting to protect, not to destroy. As the last hunter fell, Kalen stood panting in the center of the clearing, his midnight fur matted with sweat and blood, his golden eyes still blazing with that primal fire. He looked around, assessing the situation, making sure that all the threats were neutralized. Then his gaze fell on Lasara. She stood frozen, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. She had never seen anything like this before, never witnessed such raw power, such untamed wildness. Kalen slowly approached her, his movements cautious, almost hesitant. He stopped a few feet away, his golden eyes searching hers, as if gauging her reaction, assessing whether she was afraid of him, whether she now saw him as the monster the hunters believed him to be. Lasara met his gaze, her fear slowly receding, replaced by a growing sense of wonder. She saw the intelligence in his eyes, the weariness, the hint of vulnerability that still remained, even in his wolf form. She took a deep breath, her hand instinctively reaching out towards him. He flinched slightly, as if expecting her to recoil, but she didn't. She gently touched his fur, feeling the warmth of his body beneath her fingertips, the coarse texture of his coat. He stood perfectly still, allowing her touch, his golden eyes watching her intently. Lasara felt a strange connection to him, a bond that transcended words, that transcended species, that transcended the fear and prejudice that had separated their worlds for so long. Slowly, carefully, Kalen began to shift back. The transformation was just as breathtaking as the first, but this time, Lasara watched with a sense of anticipation, a feeling of relief. When he stood before her again, a man once more, he was bruised and bleeding, his clothes torn, his body weary, but his eyes were filled with a warmth, a gratitude, that made her heart ache. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Thanks to you," he said, his voice hoarse. You saved me." Lasara shook her head.
"No," she said.
"You saved us." He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through her veins. "We're in this together now, Lasara," he said. "There's no turning back." And as Lasara stared into those golden orbs, the pool rippled, the torches blazed, and a wolf called in the deep, dark reaches of the woods. The cry did not frighten her. Chapter 7. The Mark of the Wolf. The lingering echo of the wolf's howl faded into the rustling of leaves and the creaking of branches, a reminder of the wildness that surrounded them, of the world Kalen inhabited, a world Lasara was now inextricably bound to. "We need to leave," Kalen said, his voice still hoarse, his gaze scanning the edges of the clearing. More hunters could be coming. Lasara nodded, her mind still reeling from the events of the past hour. She had witnessed a werewolf transformation, a brutal fight, and a connection with Kalen that defied logic and reason. She had stepped into a world she had always believed to be a myth, a world of danger and magic, of ancient curses and hidden wars. He led her away from the clearing, deeper into the forest, following a path that seemed known only to him. The trees loomed above them, their branches intertwined, blocking out the moonlight, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on her eyes. Lasara stumbled, her legs weary, her body still trembling from the adrenaline surge. Kalen immediately steadied her, his hand strong and reassuring on her arm. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "Just tired," Lasara replied, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "And overwhelmed." He nodded understandingly.
"It's a lot to take in," he said.
"I know." They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds their footsteps on the soft earth and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. Lasara felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration, a sense of dread and anticipation that warred within her. She looked at Kalen, walking beside her, his profile etched against the faint light filtering through the trees. He was still bruised and bleeding, his clothes torn, his body weary, but he moved with a quiet grace, a confidence that belied his injuries. She wondered about his life, about the burden he carried, about the war he had spoken of. She wondered about the curse that bound him to the moon, to the shadows, to a life of constant struggle. She wondered about the connection they shared, the bond that had been forged in fear and sealed by a touch. "Where are we going?" she asked finally, her voice breaking the silence. "Somewhere safe," he replied. "Somewhere they won't find us." "And where is that?" He hesitated, his gaze shifting towards the deeper parts of the forest, as if searching for something or someone. "The heart of the Holofong," he said finally. "My home." Lasara's heart skipped a beat. She was going to the heart of the werewolf territory, to the place she had been warned about her entire life, to the place where the whispers were strongest, where the magic was most potent, where the danger was most real. As they walked, Lasara noticed a strange tingling sensation on her arm, the one Kalen had touched when he had studied her. She pulled back her sleeve and examined her skin. There, on the inside of her forearm, was a mark. It was faint, almost invisible, but it was definitely there. It was a small, circular symbol, the same design as Kalen's ring, the same carving as the one on her grandmother's old wooden chest. She looked at Kalen, her eyes wide with surprise and confusion. What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He stopped and examined her arm, his golden eyes widening slightly. He gently touched the mark, his fingers tracing its outline. "It's the mark of the Holofong," he said, his voice low and laced with a hint of awe. "A sign of connection, of belonging." "But how?" Lasara asked, her mind reeling. I'm not a werewolf." He shook his head. "It's not about being a werewolf," he said. "It's about the old blood, about the promise, about you." He looked at her, his golden eyes searching hers, as if trying to convey something he couldn't put into words. "It means you are one of us now, Lasara," he said. "Bound to us, protected by us." Lasara felt a shiver run down her spine, a mixture of fear and acceptance. She was marked, chosen, claimed. She was no longer just Lasara Rathmore, the village herbalist, the widow living a quiet life on the edge of a haunted forest. She was something more, something other. She looked at the mark on her arm, at the symbol of the Holofong, and she knew that her life had changed forever. She was caught between two worlds, the world of humans and the world of werewolves, and she was no longer sure where she belonged. But she knew that where Kalen was, she was supposed to be. Kalen stepped forward, taking her hand. They started walking hand in hand. "Welcome to the pack, Lasara." And the forest, no longer menacing, seemed to whisper her name on the wind. Chapter 8. The Village of Whispering Pines. The journey to the heart of the Holofong was long and arduous. Lasara, despite her age and weariness, kept pace with Kalen, her determination fueled by a mixture of adrenaline and a growing sense of belonging. The mark on her arm, the symbol of the Holofong, seemed to pulse with a faint warmth, a constant reminder of her connection to Kalen, to the pack, to this new, dangerous world she had entered. The forest grew denser, the trees taller and more ancient, their branches intertwined like skeletal fingers, blocking out most of the moonlight. The air grew colder, the scent of pine and damp earth intensified, mingled with the musky scent of wolf, a scent that was both familiar and strangely comforting. Kalen guided her through the darkness, his senses on high alert, his body tense and ready for any threat. He moved with a silent grace, an instinctive knowledge of the forest, his steps sure and confident, even on the uneven terrain. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they emerged into a clearing. Lasara gasped, her breath catching in her throat. Before her, nestled in a valley surrounded by towering pines, was a village. It wasn't like any village she had ever seen. The buildings were constructed of wood and stone, seamlessly integrated into the natural landscape, as if they had grown organically from the forest floor. They were sturdy and well-built, but with a rustic charm, a sense of ancient craftsmanship that spoke of generations of werewolves living in harmony with their surroundings. Smoke curled from chimneys, carrying the scent of wood smoke and something savory, something that made Lasara's stomach rumble with hunger. Faint light flickered from windows, casting a warm, inviting glow that contrasted with the darkness of the surrounding forest. "Welcome to Whispering Pines," Kalen said, his voice soft, a hint of pride in his tone. "Our home." Lasara looked around, her eyes wide with wonder. It was beautiful, peaceful, a sanctuary hidden deep within the heart of the Holophong, a place where werewolves lived, not as monsters, but as a community, a family. As they approached the village, figures began to emerge from the shadows, their forms indistinct at first, but gradually resolving into men and women, some young, some old, all with the same intense, golden eyes as Kalen. They watched Lasara with a mixture of curiosity and caution. They were wary of her, an outsider, a human, but they also seemed to sense her connection to Kalen, the mark on her arm, the bond that had been forged between them. Kalen raised his hand, a gesture of reassurance, and the villagers relaxed slightly, their expressions softening. "This is Lasara," Kalen said, his voice carrying clearly through the quiet night air. "She is under my protection. She is one of us now." A murmur went through the crowd, a mixture of surprise and acceptance. An elderly woman, her hair as silver as Lasara's, her eyes a piercing gold, stepped forward. "Welcome, Lasara," she said, her voice warm and welcoming, her gaze filled with a deep understanding. "I am Alara's sister, Mara. Kalen has told me much about you." Lasara's heart skipped a beat. Alara's sister, the connection to her grandmother, to the past, to the promise, felt even stronger now. "It's an honor to meet you," Lasara said, her voice trembling slightly. Mara smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that eased Lasara's apprehension. "The honor is ours," she said. "Come, you must be tired and hungry. We have prepared a place for you." Mara led Lasara and Kalen through the village, towards a large, two-story building constructed of wood and stone, with a wide porch and a welcoming fire burning in the hearth. It was the heart of the village, the gathering place, the home of the Alpha. As they entered, Lasara was struck by the warmth and comfort of the interior. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting scenes of wolves and forests, of ancient battles and moonlit hunts. The furniture was handcrafted and sturdy, with comfortable cushions and throws made of fur and wool. The air was filled with the scent of wood smoke, roasted meat, and herbs. A long table dominated the center of the room, laden with food, roasted venison, baked fish, wild berries, and freshly baked bread. Several werewolves were already seated, their faces turned towards Lasara and Kalen, their eyes filled with curiosity. Kalen introduced Lasara to the pack members, each name a reminder of the legends, of the whispers, of the wild heart of the Holophong. There was Ronan, the strong and silent warrior Lyra, the swift and agile huntress Finn, the young and eager pup, and many others, each with their own unique personality and role within the pack. They welcomed her with a mixture of reserve and warmth, offering her food and drink, making space for her at the table, treating her with a respect that surprised and humbled her. As Lasara ate, she listened to the conversations around her, the stories of the pack, the challenges they faced, the bonds that held them together. She learned more about the war, about the hunters, about the ancient curse that bound them to the moon. She also learned more about Kalen, about his leadership, about his compassion, about his unwavering commitment to protecting his pack, to finding a way to end the violence, to break the cycle of hatred and fear. As the food settled, and Lasara began to feel her eyelids droop, Mara led her to a room. "Rest, child," she said. And for the first time in her life, Lasara felt completely safe. Chapter 9. Unveiling Ancient Secrets. Lasara awoke to the smell of wood smoke and brewing herbs, a familiar scent that brought a sense of comfort and home. She was in a small, cozy room, furnished with a comfortable bed, a wooden chest, and a small table and chair. Sunlight streamed through a window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, casting a warm glow on the wooden floor. She stretched, her muscles stiff from the long journey and the unfamiliar bed, but her mind felt clear, refreshed. She had slept soundly, deeply, for the first time in weeks, free from the nightmares and anxieties that had plagued her since Thomas's death. The mark on her arm, the symbol of the holophong, seemed to pulse with a faint warmth, a constant reminder of her connection to Kaelin, to the pack, to this new life she had embraced. She rose and dressed, putting on the simple, practical clothes Mara had provided for her, a warm woolen tunic, sturdy trousers, and comfortable boots. She felt a strange sense of rightness, wearing these clothes, as if she were shedding the remnants of her old life, embracing the new. She opened the wooden chest and found a few more personal items, a hairbrush, a comb, and a small, silver-framed mirror. She brushed her hair, her silver strands catching the sunlight, and looked at her reflection. She saw the same familiar face, the same blue eyes, the same lines of age and experience, but there was something different. A spark in her eyes, a hint of wildness, a sense of purpose. She left the room and followed the scent of brewing herbs to a large, open kitchen where Mara was busy stirring a pot over a crackling fire. The air was filled with the aroma of various herbs, some familiar, some unknown, all blending together in a complex and intoxicating fragrance. "Good morning, Lasara," Mara said, her voice warm and welcoming, her golden eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," Lasara replied, her voice filled with gratitude. Mara smiled. "The forest has a way of healing," she said, "especially for those who belong here." She gestured towards a table laden with food, freshly baked bread, honey, wild berries, and a steaming pot of herbal tea.
"Eat," she said.
"You need your strength." Lasara ate with relish, her appetite surprisingly strong. The food was simple but delicious, nourishing her body and soul. As she ate, she and Mara talked, sharing stories, exchanging knowledge, forging a bond of friendship and kinship. Mara told Lasara more about Alara, their shared ancestor, the woman who had made the promise to the holophong, the woman who had possessed the power to heal, to soothe, to connect. Alara was a powerful woman, Mara said, a seer, a healer, a bridge between our worlds. She understood the balance, the delicate dance between humans and werewolves, between nature and magic. "And the promise?" Lasara asked, her voice hesitant. What exactly did she promise? Mara's expression grew serious. "She promised to help us find a way to break the curse," she said. "To end the war. To bring peace to our kind." "But how?" Mara sighed. "That's the mystery," she said. The details of the promise were lost over time, fragmented, distorted by fear and prejudice. But we believe it involves a ritual, a ceremony that requires a catalyst. "A catalyst?" Lasara repeated, her mind racing. "What kind of catalyst?" Mara looked at Lasara, her golden eyes searching hers, as if trying to convey something she couldn't put into words. "You," she said finally. Alara believed that one of her descendants would possess the power to unlock the secrets of the past, to complete the ritual, to break the curse. Lasara felt a shiver run down her spine. The weight of responsibility, of expectation, settled upon her shoulders. She, a simple herbalist, a widow living a quiet life? How could she possibly fulfill such a daunting task? Mara, reading Lasara, put down her spoon and turned to the younger woman. "There is an old library," Mara said, "filled with the knowledge of our ancestors. Perhaps the answers you seek are there." Lasara considered this. She has spent a life with books, the knowledge of plants and flowers, of remedies. To find the answers in a place of old tomes was comforting. And she nodded. Mara led her to a room filled floor to ceiling with books, scrolls, and manuscripts. The very air was heavy with the scent of the past. "Take your time," she said. And so Lasara began. Chapter 10. The Dance of Shadows and Moonlight. The ancient library of Whispering Pines was a sanctuary of knowledge, a repository of centuries of accumulated wisdom, lore, and secrets. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper, leather-bound tomes, and dried herbs, a fragrance that both calmed and invigorated Lasara's senses. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that filtered through the high, narrow windows, illuminating rows upon rows of shelves filled with books of all shapes and sizes. Lasara spent hours poring over the ancient texts, her fingers tracing the faded ink, her mind absorbing the words, the stories, the prophecies, the rituals. She learned more about the history of the Holophong, about their origins, their struggles, their triumphs, their connection to the moon, to the forest, to the ancient magic that flowed through their veins. She discovered detailed accounts of the curse, its origins in a betrayal, a broken pact, a tragic love affair between a powerful werewolf alpha and a human sorceress. She read about the devastating consequences of the curse, the forced transformations, the loss of control, the endless cycle of violence and suffering. She also found fragments of information about Alara's promise, hints of a ritual, a ceremony that could potentially break the curse, and the war, bring peace to the werewolves and humans alike. But the details were elusive, scattered throughout various texts, written in cryptic language, obscured by symbolism and metaphor. As the day wore on, Lasara grew increasingly frustrated. She had found pieces of the puzzle, but she couldn't seem to put them together. She was missing something, a key, a crucial piece of information that would unlock the secrets of the past. As dusk settled, casting long shadows across the library, Kalen entered. He had been out hunting with the pack, ensuring the safety of the village, preparing for the inevitable confrontation with the hunters. He found Lasara surrounded by books, her brow furrowed in concentration, her silver hair illuminated by the faint light of a single candle. "How goes the search?" he asked, his voice soft, his golden eyes filled with concern. Lasara sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm finding bits and pieces," she said. "But it's like trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing." Kalen sat down beside her, his presence a comforting warmth in the cool, quiet library. He picked up one of the ancient texts, his fingers tracing the faded ink with a reverence that spoke of his deep respect for the past, for the knowledge of his ancestors.
"It takes time," he said.
"And patience. The answers will reveal themselves when you're ready." Lasara looked at him, at his calm, reassuring presence, at the wisdom in his golden eyes, and she felt a surge of hope. She wasn't alone in this. She had Kalen, she had the pack, she had the support of a community that believed in her, that trusted her, that saw her as one of them.
"Tell me more about the curse," she said.
"About the transformations. About what it feels like." Kalen hesitated, his expression clouding over. He rarely spoke of his wolf form, of the primal instincts that took over, of the struggle to maintain control, of the fear of losing himself completely. But he saw the genuine curiosity in Lasara's eyes, the desire to understand, to connect, to help. And he knew that he could trust her, that he could share this part of himself with her, without judgment, without fear. He began to describe the transformations, the agonizing pain, the overwhelming surge of power, the heightened senses, the primal urges, the struggle to retain a shred of humanity, the constant battle between the man and the beast. He spoke of the moon's influence, of the full moon's power to amplify the curse, to make the transformations more intense, more difficult to control. He spoke of the blood moon, a rare and terrifying event that heightened the curse to unimaginable levels, driving werewolves into a frenzy of bloodlust and violence. As he spoke, Lasara listened intently, her heart aching for him, for the burden he carried, for the suffering he endured. She reached out and gently took his hand, her touch sending a familiar warmth through his veins. "I'm here," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'll help you. We'll find a way." Kalen looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else. Something that looked like love. He squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you, Lasara," he said, "for understanding." Suddenly, a faint sound reached their ears, a melody drifting through the open window, carried on the night air. It was the sound of music, of laughter, of celebration. "What's that?" Lasara asked, her curiosity piqued. Kalen smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that lit up his features.
It's the moon dance, he said. A tradition.
A way to honor the moon, to embrace our wolf nature, to connect. He stood up and extended his hand to her.
Come, he said.
Join us. Lasara hesitated. She was still an outsider, a human, unsure of her place in this werewolf community. But she saw the invitation in Kalen's eyes, the warmth, the acceptance, the desire. She took his hand, and he led her out of the library, into the heart of the village, towards the source of the music, towards the dance of shadows and moonlight. The music intensified, calling to them both. Chapter 11. The Curse of the Blood Moon. The village square was alive with activity. A large bonfire crackled and roared in the center, casting dancing shadows on the surrounding buildings, illuminating the faces of the werewolves gathered around. The air was filled with the scent of wood smoke, roasted meat, and the musky, intoxicating aroma of the pack. Music filled the air, a rhythmic, primal beat played on drums, flutes, and other handcrafted instruments. Werewolves, some in human form, some partially transformed, danced around the bonfire, their movements fluid and graceful, their bodies swaying to the rhythm of the music. Lasara watched in awe and wonder, her senses overwhelmed by the sights, the sounds, the smells of this ancient, primal celebration. She had never seen anything like this before, never witnessed such raw energy, such untamed joy, such a deep connection to nature, to the moon, to the wild heart of the Holofong. Kalen led her to the edge of the circle, his hand still holding hers, his presence a comforting anchor in this swirling vortex of energy. He introduced her to more members of the pack, each one welcoming her with a nod, a smile, a touch, a gesture of acceptance. She felt a strange sense of belonging, a feeling that she had found her place, her tribe, her family. She was no longer an outsider, a stranger, but a part of this community, bound to them by the mark on her arm, by her connection to Kalen, by her shared destiny. As the music intensified, Kalen pulled her into the dance. Lasara hesitated, feeling awkward and unsure of herself, but he held her close, guiding her movements, his body swaying in perfect rhythm with hers. She closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her, letting her body move instinctively, letting go of her inhibitions, her fears, her doubts. She felt a sense of freedom, a release of pent-up emotions, a connection to something ancient and primal, something that resonated deep within her soul. As they danced, Lasara felt a shift in the air, a change in the energy. The moon, which had been a sliver in the sky, suddenly seemed to grow larger, brighter, casting an eerie, reddish glow over the village. The music changed, becoming more frantic, more intense, more unsettling. The werewolves around them began to transform, their bodies shifting and changing, their eyes glowing with a fierce, primal fire. Lasara felt a surge of fear, a primal instinct to flee, but Kalen held her close, his grip tightening on her hand. "It's the blood moon," he said, his voice strained, his body trembling with the effort to control the transformation that was threatening to overtake him. "It's rare, powerful, dangerous." Lasara looked at him, at the struggle etched on his face, at the pain in his golden eyes, and she knew that he was fighting to protect her, to keep her safe, even as he battled his own inner demons. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines of tension, her touch soothing, calming, grounding. "I'm not afraid," she said, her voice firm, despite the tremor in her heart. "I'm with you." Kalen looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and love. He leaned down and kissed her, a brief, passionate kiss that sent a jolt of electricity through her veins. The kiss broke, and Kalen took a step back, shaking. "Stay close," he said hoarsely. "Don't leave my sight." The transformations around them were complete. The village square was now filled with werewolves, their forms magnificent and terrifying, their eyes glowing with the eerie, reddish light of the blood moon. The music reached a crescendo, a wild, frenzied rhythm that seemed to drive the werewolves into a state of ecstasy. They howled and roared, their voices blending together in a chorus of primal energy that echoed through the forest. Lasara felt a strange pull, a connection to the werewolves, to their wildness, to their power. She felt the mark on her arm burn, a searing heat that spread through her veins. She felt, from the center of her being, a strange pull. And then, she looked to Kalen, and saw him beginning to lose control. Chapter 12. A bond forged in fear. Kalen's struggle was palpable. His body trembled violently, his muscles straining against the forced transformation. His golden eyes, usually filled with intelligence and warmth, now flickered with a wild, untamed fire, the pupils dilated, reflecting the eerie reddish glow of the blood moon. He clenched his fists, his knuckles white, his breathing ragged and uneven. Lasara watched in horror and compassion. She knew what he was going through, the agonizing pain, the overwhelming surge of primal instincts, the struggle to retain a shred of humanity, the fear of losing himself completely to the beast within.
She had to do something.
She couldn't just stand there and watch him suffer. She had to help him. She remembered the words of her grandmother, the whispers of the forest, the promise of Alara. She remembered the feeling of connection, the bond that had been forged between her and Kalen, the mark on her arm that pulsed with a faint warmth, a reminder of her power, her purpose. She stepped forward, placing herself between Kalen and the other werewolves, who were now caught up in a frenzy of howling and roaring, their movements wild and uncontrolled. "Kalen," she shouted, her voice barely audible above the din. "Look at me. Focus on me." He didn't seem to hear her. He was lost in the throes of the transformation, his body convulsing, his eyes fixed on the blood moon, his mind consumed by the primal urges that were threatening to overwhelm him. Lasara reached out and grabbed his face, her hands cupping his cheeks, forcing him to look at her. His skin was hot to the touch, his fur bristling beneath her fingertips. "Kalen," she repeated, her voice firmer this time, her eyes locked on his. "It's me, Lasara. You can fight this. You're stronger than the curse." For a moment, his eyes seemed to clear, a flicker of recognition, a spark of humanity returning to their golden depths. He looked at her, his gaze filled with pain, with fear, with love. "Lasara," he gasped, his voice hoarse and strained. "Help me," Lasara knew what she had to do. She had to use her connection to him, her power, her love, to help him control the transformation, to help him retain his humanity, to help him resist the pull of the blood moon. She closed her eyes, focusing on the bond between them, on the mark on her arm, on the whispers of the forest, on the promise of Alara. She reached deep within herself, drawing on a strength she didn't know she possessed, a power that had been dormant within her for so long. She channeled that power, that energy, that love, towards Kalen, sending it through her touch, through her gaze, through her very being. She visualized his wolf form, calming, soothing, controlling, bringing it back under his control. She whispered words of comfort, of reassurance, of love, her voice a steady, calming presence in the midst of the chaos. "You're not a monster, Kalen," she whispered. "You're a good man. You're strong. You're loved. You can control this. You will control this." Slowly, gradually, Kalen's struggles began to subside. His trembling lessened, his breathing became more even, his eyes cleared, the wild fire receding, replaced by the familiar warmth and intelligence. He looked at Lasara, his gaze filled with gratitude, with relief, with awe. You did it," he whispered, his voice hoarse but steady. "You saved me." Lasara smiled, tears streaming down her face. "We saved each other," she said. The other werewolves, sensing the shift in Kalen's energy, began to calm down as well. The frenzy subsided, the howling and roaring diminished, replaced by a quiet murmuring, a sense of peace. The blood moon, which had seemed so large and menacing, began to shrink, its reddish glow fading, replaced by the normal, silvery light of the full moon. The transformations reversed, the werewolves returning to their human forms, their bodies weary, their minds exhausted, but their spirits renewed. They looked at Lasara with a mixture of respect and reverence. They had witnessed her power, her connection to Kaelin, her ability to control the curse, to bring peace to the pack. Mara stepped forward, her golden eyes filled with pride and gratitude. "You have proven yourself, Lasara," she said. "You are truly Alara's descendant. You are the key." Lasara felt a surge of confidence, a sense of purpose. She had faced her fears, embraced her power, and saved the man she loved. She was no longer just Lasara Rathmore, the village herbalist, the widow living a quiet life. She was Lasara of the Hollow Fong, a woman of power, a woman of destiny, a woman in love. She was no longer afraid. Chapter 13. The Gathering Storm. The aftermath of the blood moon left the village of Whispering Pines in a state of quiet reflection. The werewolves, exhausted but renewed, tended to their injuries, both physical and emotional, drawing strength from each other, from the shared experience, from the leadership of Kaelin, and from the newfound hope that Lasara represented. Lasara, too, was changed by the experience. She had faced her fears, embraced her power, and saved Kaelin from the grip of the curse. She had proven herself to be more than just a simple herbalist, more than just a widow living a quiet life. She was a woman of strength, a woman of courage, a woman of destiny. She spent the next few days exploring the village, learning more about the pack, their customs, their traditions, their way of life. She helped Mara in the kitchen, brewing herbal remedies, tending to the injured, sharing her knowledge of plants and healing. She also spent time with Kaelin, deepening their bond, exploring their connection, learning more about each other, about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. They walked in the forest, hand in hand, sharing stories, exchanging secrets, falling deeper in love with each and every passing breath of air they took. Kaelin told her more about the war, about the hunters, about their relentless pursuit of the werewolves, their desire to eradicate them from the face of the earth. He spoke of the ancient hatred, the blind fear, the prejudice that fueled their actions. He also spoke of his hopes for peace, his desire to find a way to end the violence, to break the cycle of hatred and fear, to create a world where werewolves and humans could coexist, not as enemies, but as neighbors. Lasara listened intently, her heart aching for him, for the burden he carried, for the responsibility he shouldered. She knew that she had a role to play in this, that she was the key to fulfilling Alara's promise, to breaking the curse, to ending the war. But she also knew that they were running out of time. The hunters were still out there, searching for them, growing stronger, more organized, more determined. They had to act quickly, before it was too late. One morning, as Lasara and Kaelin were walking in the forest, they were interrupted by Ronan, the strong and silent warrior, his face grim, his golden eyes filled with concern. "Kaelin," he said, his voice urgent, "we have a problem. The hunters, they're gathering. They've found our scent. They're heading this way." Kaelin's expression hardened, his jaw set in a firm line. "How many?" he asked. "Too many," Ronan replied. "More than we've ever faced before. They're heavily armed. And they have something else. Something new." "What do you mean?" Lasara asked, her heart pounding with a sudden sense of dread. Ronan hesitated, his gaze shifting towards the deeper parts of the forest. "They have allies," he said. "Creatures not of this world. Dark magic. Something evil." Kaelin's eyes narrowed. "We need to prepare," he said. "We need to defend the village. We need to protect our pack." He turned to Lasara, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of concern and determination. "You need to stay safe," he said. "You need to stay hidden." Lasara shook her head. "No," she said. "I won't hide. I'm one of you now. I'll fight alongside you." Kaelin hesitated, his desire to protect her warring with his respect for her strength, her courage, her power. "It's too dangerous," he said. "I'm not afraid," Lasara insisted. "We're in this together, remember?" Kaelin looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, at the determination on her face, and he knew that he couldn't deny her. He couldn't protect her by hiding her away. He had to trust her, to believe in her, to fight alongside her. He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. All right, he said. Together. They returned to the village, their steps quick and purposeful, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of the gathering storm. The werewolves were already preparing for battle, sharpening their claws, honing their senses, their bodies tense and ready for action. Lysara felt a surge of adrenaline, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She was about to face the greatest challenge of her life, a battle that would determine the fate of the Holophong, the fate of the werewolves, the fate of her love. The clouds began to gather, the sky turned a dull, forbidding shade of gray, and the wind seemed to carry a sense of foreboding. Chapter 14. Trials of Trust and Loyalty. The atmosphere in Whispering Pines was thick with tension, a palpable sense of anticipation and dread hanging in the air. The werewolves, usually jovial and relaxed within the safety of their village, were now grim and focused, their senses on high alert, their bodies poised for action. The sounds of laughter and music had been replaced by the sharpening of claws, the hushed whispers of strategy, and the quiet prayers to the ancient spirits of the forest. Lysara, despite her determination to fight alongside Kaelin and the pack, felt a knot of fear tightening in her stomach. She had never faced such danger before, never witnessed such a blatant display of aggression and hatred. She was an herbalist, a healer, not a warrior. But she knew that she couldn't back down. She had made a promise, not just to Kaelin, but to herself, to the memory of Alara, to the future of the Holophong. She had to stand strong, to embrace her power, to fight for what she believed in. Kaelin, sensing her unease, placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of concern and love. Are you all right? He asked, his voice soft, his gaze searching hers. Lysara nodded, forcing a smile. Just nervous, she admitted. He squeezed her shoulder gently. We all are, he said. But we'll face this together. We'll protect each other. He led her to a small, secluded clearing just outside the village, where Mara was waiting for them. The elderly woman, her silver hair braided tightly, her golden eyes filled with wisdom and worry, held a small, wooden box in her hands. Lysara, Mara said, her voice grave. It's time. We need to prepare you for the ritual. Lysara's heart skipped a beat. The ritual? The ceremony that could potentially break the curse, and the war, bring peace to the werewolves and humans alike. The task that had been entrusted to her, the descendant of Alara, the key to unlocking the secrets of the past. She had almost forgotten about it, caught up in the preparations for battle, in the fear of the approaching hunters, in the deepening love she felt for Kaelin. But now, faced with the reality of the ritual, she felt a surge of doubt. Was she ready? Was she strong enough? Was she capable of wielding such power? Mara opened the wooden box, revealing its contents, a silver dagger, intricately carved with symbols of the moon and the forest, a small, crystal vial filled with a shimmering, iridescent liquid, and a scroll of ancient parchment covered in faded ink and cryptic diagrams. These are the tools of the ritual, Mara said. They have been passed down through generations, waiting for the one who could unlock their power. She handed Lysara the dagger, its cold metal sending a shiver down her spine. This is the blade of Alara, she said. It is used to channel the energy of the moon, to focus your power, to sever the ties that bind. She then handed her the crystal vial. This is the essence of the forest, she said. It is a mixture of rare herbs, gathered under the light of the full moon, infused with the magic of the Holophong. It will amplify your connection to the earth, to the spirits, to the source. Finally, she gave her the scroll. This is the ritual of reversal, she said. It contains the words, the incantations, the steps you must follow to break the curse. Lysara took the items, her hands trembling slightly. They felt heavy, laden with history, with power, with responsibility. She looked at Kaelin, her eyes searching his, seeking reassurance, seeking guidance, seeking love. He nodded, his expression solemn but encouraging. You can do this, Lysara, he said. I believe in you. His words gave her strength, his belief in her fueling her own. She took a deep breath, steeling her resolve, preparing herself for the task ahead. But before they could begin the ritual, a commotion erupted from the village. Ronan, his face pale, his body covered in scratches and bruises, burst into the clearing.
Kaelin,
He shouted, his voice urgent. They're here. The hunters. They've breached the perimeter. Kaelin's expression hardened, his jaw set in a firm line.
we have to go, he said. Now.
He turned to Lasara, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. The ritual, it will have to wait, he said. We need to defend the village. We need to protect our pack. Lasara nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and frustration. The ritual, her chance to end the war, to break the curse, to save Kaelin and the pack, had been interrupted. But she knew that she had to put her personal desires aside. She had to focus on the immediate threat, on the battle that was about to begin. She handed the ritual items back to Mara, her hands shaking slightly.
Keep them safe, she said.
We'll finish this later. Mara nodded, her expression grim but understanding.
Be careful, she said.
Both of you. Kaelin and Lasara rushed back to the village, their steps quick and purposeful, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of the impending fight. As they reached the edge of the village, they saw them, the hunters. Dozens of them, armed with crossbows, swords, and something else. Something dark and menacing, something that made Lasara's skin crawl. Standing at the front of the hunters was Bastion. His cold, cruel eyes glinted. He was holding a strange, black orb, and behind him stood several figures draped in shadows. Chapter 15. The Heart of the Holophong. Bastion's sneer was a mask of cruel triumph, his eyes glinting with a hatred that sent shivers down Lasara's spine. He held the black orb aloft, its surface swirling with dark energy, casting an unnatural, unsettling shadow over the scene. Behind him, the shadowy figures stood motionless, their forms indistinct, their presence radiating an aura of menace and ancient evil. Well, Bastion said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Look who's decided to join the party. The Alpha and his pet. Kaelin stepped forward, his body tense and ready for action, his golden eyes blazing with defiance. This ends now, Bastion, he said, his voice a low growl, the sound resonating with the power of the Holophong. Indeed, it does, Bastion replied, his smile widening. But not in the way you think. He raised the black orb higher, and the shadowy figures behind him began to chant, their voices a low, guttural drone that seemed to vibrate the very air around them. The orb pulsed with a dark, malevolent energy, and Lasara felt a wave of nausea wash over her, a sense of dread so profound it threatened to overwhelm her. What is that? She whispered, her voice trembling. Kaelin, his gaze fixed on Bastion, answered without looking at her. Dark magic, he said, his voice grim. Something ancient. Something evil. It's a soul eater, Mara said, appearing suddenly beside them, her face pale, her golden eyes filled with fear. An artifact of immense power. It can drain the life force of werewolves, turning them into empty shells. Lasara gasped, her hand instinctively going to the mark on her arm, the symbol of the Holophong. She felt a sudden, sharp pain, as if the mark were burning, reacting to the presence of the soul eater. We have to stop them, she said, her voice filled with urgency. We have to destroy that orb. Kaelin nodded, his expression determined.
We will, he said.
But we need a plan. The werewolves of Whispering Pines, now fully transformed, their forms magnificent and terrifying, gathered around Kaelin, their eyes glowing with the fierce, primal fire of the pack. They were ready to fight, to defend their home, to protect their alpha, to die if necessary. But Kaelin knew that brute force alone wouldn't be enough. They were outnumbered, outmatched, facing an enemy that wielded a power they didn't understand, a power that could potentially destroy them all. He looked at Lasara, his golden eyes searching hers, seeking guidance, seeking inspiration, seeking hope.
The ritual, he said.
The ritual of reversal. Could it work? Could it counteract the soul eater? Lasara hesitated. The ritual was designed to break the curse, not to combat dark magic. But it was their only hope.
I don't know, she said.
But we have to try. We have nothing to lose. Mara nodded, her expression grim but resolute. I'll retrieve the items, she said. Meet me at the sacred grove. It's the only place with enough power to amplify the ritual's effects. She disappeared back into the village, her movements swift and purposeful. Kalen turned to his pack, his voice ringing with authority, with the power of an alpha, with the ancient strength of the Holophong. We fight, he roared. We protect our home. We protect our pack. We protect Lasara. The werewolves responded with a chorus of howls and roars, their voices blending together in a deafening wave of sound that echoed through the forest. They charged towards the hunters, their claws extended, their teeth bared, their bodies a blur of motion and fury. The battle began. Lasara and Kalen, fighting side by side, moved towards the sacred grove, a secluded clearing deep within the forest, where the ancient spirits of the Holophong were said to reside. It was a place of power, a place of peace, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. As they fought their way through the chaos, Lasara felt a surge of strength, a power she hadn't known she possessed. The mark on her arm burned with a fierce heat, channeling the energy of the forest, of the moon, of the ancestors. She moved with a grace and agility she hadn't known she possessed, dodging attacks, striking back with surprising force, her movements guided by an instinct, a connection to something ancient and primal. She was no longer just Lasara Rathmore, the village herbalist, the widow. She was Lasara of the Holophong, a warrior, a protector, a key. They reached the sacred grove, a circle of ancient trees surrounding a moss-covered altar, the air thick with magic, with the presence of the spirits, with the heart of the Holophong. And Mara was waiting. Chapter 16. Scars of the Past. Mara stood beside the moss-covered altar, the ritual items laid out before her, the blade of Alara, the essence of the forest, and the ritual of reversal. Her face was pale but determined, her golden eyes reflecting the flickering light of the torches that had been hastily lit around the grove. The sounds of battle echoed from the village, a constant reminder of the desperate fight raging just beyond the trees. We don't have much time, Mara said, her voice urgent but steady. The Soul Eater is growing stronger. We must begin the ritual immediately. Lasara nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration, a sense of dread and anticipation. She was about to attempt something she didn't fully understand, something that could potentially save them all or destroy them. She took her place before the altar, Kalen standing beside her, his presence a comforting anchor in the swirling vortex of energy that filled the grove. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch sending a surge of warmth and strength through her veins. I'm here, he whispered, his golden eyes filled with love and trust. Always. Lasara took a deep breath, steeling her resolve, focusing on the task ahead. She picked up the blade of Alara, its cold metal sending a shiver down her spine. She held it aloft, feeling the energy of the moon, of the forest, of the ancestors, flowing through her, channeling into the blade, making it hum with power. She opened the scroll containing the ritual of reversal, her eyes scanning the faded ink, the cryptic diagrams, the ancient words. She began to chant, her voice trembling at first, but gradually gaining strength and confidence, resonating with the power of the Holophong, with the magic of the grove, with the hope of her heart. As she chanted, she poured the essence of the forest over the blade, the shimmering liquid coating the metal, making it glow with an otherworldly light. She felt a surge of energy, a connection to the earth, to the spirits, to the source. The air around them crackled with power, the trees swayed and rustled, the torches flared and flickered, casting dancing shadows on the surrounding forest. The sounds of battle faded into the background, replaced by the rhythmic chanting, by the hum of the blade, by the pulse of magic. But as Lasara continued the ritual, she felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest, a searing heat that spread through her veins. She gasped, stumbling back a step, her hand going to her heart. Kalen caught her, his arms strong and supportive, his golden eyes filled with concern. Lasara, what's wrong? She looked at him, her eyes filled with pain and confusion. I don't know, she whispered. It's like something's tearing me apart. Mara's eyes widened in alarm. The Soul Eater, she exclaimed. It's fighting back. It's attacking her connection to the pack. Lasara felt the mark on her arm burn, a searing agony that threatened to overwhelm her. She saw images flashing before her eyes, fragmented and fleeting. Faces of the werewolves she had come to know, to love, to belong to. She saw their pain, their fear, their suffering. She saw Kalen, his face contorted in agony, his body weakening, his life force draining away. She knew that she had to fight back. She had to resist the Soul Eater's power. She had to protect Kalen, protect the pack, protect herself. She closed her eyes, focusing on the bond between her and Kalen, on the love they shared, on the strength of the Holophong, on the promise of Alara. She drew on every ounce of her power, her will, her determination. She resumed chanting, her voice stronger now, filled with a fierce resolve, a defiance that echoed through the grove, challenging the darkness, embracing the light. As she chanted, she raised the blade of Alara and, with a cry that was both a plea and a command, plunged it into the earth at the base of the altar. A blinding light erupted from the point of impact, a surge of energy that spread outwards, engulfing the grove, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Lasara felt a sharp, agonizing pain, as if something were being ripped from her soul. But then, just as suddenly, the pain subsided, replaced by a sense of peace, a feeling of wholeness, a release. When the tremor settled and she opened her eyes, she felt different. She had survived. But she had also, to complete the ritual, had to permanently sever the connection between herself and Kalen. Chapter 17. Whispers of Rebellion. The blinding light faded, leaving Lasara, Kalen, and Mara standing in the sacred grove, the air still crackling with residual energy. The sounds of battle, which had been a distant roar, were now replaced by an eerie silence. Lasara felt empty, hollow, as if a vital part of her had been ripped away. The mark on her arm, once a symbol of connection and belonging, was now gone, leaving only smooth, unblemished skin. She looked at Kalen, her heart aching with a loss she couldn't fully comprehend. He looked different. The constant, underlying tension that had always been present in his posture, in his eyes, was gone. He seemed lighter, freer, but also distant. What happened? She whispered, her voice trembling. Kalen looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of relief and sadness. You did it, he said, his voice hoarse. You broke the connection. You freed us. Lasara felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had succeeded in severing the ties that bound the werewolves to the Soul Eater, but in doing so, she had also severed her own connection to Kalen, to the pack, to the life she had come to love. Mara stepped forward, her expression somber but grateful. You have made a great sacrifice, Lasara, she said. You have saved us all, but at a great cost. Lasara nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She knew that what she had done was necessary, that it was the only way to defeat the hunters, to protect the werewolves, to fulfill Alara's promise. But it didn't make the pain any less real, the loss any less profound. They left the sacred grove, returning to the village, their steps slow and heavy, their hearts filled with a mixture of triumph and sorrow. As they approached the village, they saw that the battle was over. The hunters were gone, defeated, scattered, their dark magic dispelled by the power of the ritual. The werewolves, some injured, some weary, but all alive, were gathered in the square, their faces reflecting a mixture of relief and confusion. They looked at Lasara, their eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and distance. They knew that she had saved them, that she had sacrificed her own connection to the pack to do so, but they also sensed the change in her, the emptiness, the loss. Kalen stepped forward, his voice ringing with authority, but lacking the underlying resonance of the alpha, the primal connection to the pack that had always been his defining characteristic. The hunters are defeated, he said. The Soul Eater is destroyed. We are free. The werewolves cheered, their voices filled with relief and celebration. But their cheers lacked the usual fervor, the primal energy, the connection to the moon, to the forest, to the heart of the Holophong. Lysara watched them, her heart aching with a sense of isolation. She had saved them, but in doing so, she had become an outsider once again, a stranger in a land she had come to call home. As the celebration continued, Lysara slipped away, unnoticed, walking towards the edge of the village, towards the forest, towards the whispers that had once called to her, but now seemed silent, distant, unreachable. She stood at the edge of the trees, looking out at the moon, which hung full and bright in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the landscape. She felt a profound sense of loneliness, a yearning for something she had lost, something she could never regain. She had broken the curse, ended the war, fulfilled Alara's promise. But at what cost? She had saved the werewolves, but she had lost her connection to them, to Kaelin, to herself. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face, whispering a silent prayer to the spirits of the forest, to the memory of Alara, to the hope of a future she could no longer imagine. As she stood there alone, a soft, rustling sound began to echo in the trees. It called to her. Chapter 18. The Price of Freedom. The soft rustling in the trees grew closer, a whisper of sound that cut through Lysara's grief, stirring a flicker of curiosity, a spark of hope. She opened her eyes, her tears still flowing, her gaze drawn to the edge of the forest, where the shadows danced and the moonlight filtered through the leaves. A figure emerged from the darkness, stepping into the silvery light. It was Kaelin. He looked different. The primal intensity that had always been present in his eyes, the underlying tension in his posture, the aura of power that had surrounded him, were gone. He was still handsome, still strong, but softer, gentler, more human. He approached her slowly, his steps hesitant, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and relief. "Lysara," he said, his voice soft, his gaze searching hers. "Are you all right?" Lysara shook her head, unable to speak, the tears still flowing, her heart aching with a loss she couldn't fully comprehend. He reached out and gently touched her face, his fingers wiping away the tears, his touch sending a shiver down her spine, but lacking the familiar spark, the electric connection that had once been there. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I feel so empty, so alone." Kaelin nodded, his expression somber but understanding. "I know," he said. "I feel it too. The connection is gone. The bond is broken." He looked up at the moon, his gaze filled with a mixture of awe and sadness.
"We're free," he said.
"The curse is lifted. The werewolves are no longer bound to the moon, to the shadows, to the beast within." He looked back at Lysara, his eyes filled with gratitude and regret.
"You did it," he said.
"You saved us all, but at a great cost." Lysara nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She had paid the price of freedom, sacrificing her own connection to the pack, to Kaelin, to the life she had come to love.
"What happens now?"
she asked, her voice trembling. Kaelin hesitated, his gaze shifting towards a village, where the werewolves were still celebrating their newfound freedom, their voices echoing through the night air, but lacking the primal energy, the connection to the moon, to the forest, to the heart of the Holophong. They will adapt," he said. "They will learn to live as humans. They will build a new life, a new future, free from the curse, free from the war, free from the past." He looked back at Lysara, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. "But you don't belong here anymore," he said. "You are no longer one of us." Lysara's heart shattered into a million pieces. She had known it, deep down, but hearing the words spoken aloud, by Kaelin, the man she loved, the man she had saved, was unbearable. She turned away, her tears flowing freely now, her body shaking with sobs. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, no purpose. Kaelin reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a wave of warmth through her veins, but lacking the familiar spark, the electric connection that had once bound them together. I will always be grateful to you, Lasara, he said, his voice choked with emotion.
You saved my life.
You gave me a future I never thought possible. He paused, his gaze searching hers, his eyes filled with a love that was both profound and bittersweet. But we can't be together, he said. Not anymore. The bond is broken. The connection is gone. Lasara nodded, her heart aching with a pain so intense it felt like a physical wound. She knew that he was right, that their paths had diverged, that their destinies were no longer intertwined. She pulled her hand away from his, her fingers lingering on his for a moment, savoring the last vestiges of their connection, before letting go completely. Goodbye, Kaelin, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the forest, leaving behind the village, the werewolves, the man she loved, the life she had lost. As she walked, she didn't know where she was going, what she would do, or how she would survive. But she knew that she had to keep moving, keep searching, keep hoping. But as she walked away, the wind picked up, and she heard whispers. Chapter 19. A Love Born of Darkness. The whispers followed Lasara as she walked, a chorus of voices carried on the wind, murmuring her name, guiding her steps, leading her deeper into the forest. They were different now, no longer the primal call of the hollow Fong, but something softer, gentler, more familiar. They were the whispers of the forest itself, the ancient spirits of the trees, the guardians of the land, the keepers of the balance. They spoke to her not as a werewolf, not as a member of the pack, but as Lasara, the woman, the healer, the bridge between worlds. She followed the whispers, her feet moving instinctively, her heart heavy with sorrow, but her spirit unbroken. She had lost everything, but she had also gained something. Freedom, independence, a purpose. She walked for hours, the moon her only companion, the forest her only guide. She didn't know where she was going, but she trusted the whispers, trusting that they would lead her to where she needed to be, to what she needed to do. As dawn approached, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, the whispers led her to a clearing, a hidden sanctuary nestled deep within the heart of the forest. In the center of the clearing stood a small, stone cottage, its walls covered in ivy, its roof overgrown with moss, its windows glowing with a warm, inviting light. Lasara approached the cottage cautiously, her heart pounding with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She had never seen this place before, never heard of it, never imagined it. As she drew closer, the door of the cottage opened and a figure emerged, stepping into the morning light. It was a woman, tall and slender, with long, flowing silver hair and piercing blue eyes, her face etched with wisdom and kindness. Lasara gasped, her breath catching in her throat. She knew this woman. She had seen her in her dreams, in her visions, in the memories of Alara. "Grandmother?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The woman smiled, a warm, welcoming smile that eased Lasara's apprehension, filling her heart with a sense of peace. "Welcome, Lasara," she said, her voice soft and melodious, her gaze filled with love and understanding. "I've been waiting for you." Lasara stepped forward, her legs shaking slightly, her mind reeling with confusion and wonder. "But how?" she asked. You're dead." Alara chuckled, a light, musical sound that echoed through the clearing. "Death is not the end, Lasara," she said. "It is merely a transformation, a transition, a new beginning." She gestured towards the cottage.
"Come," she said.
"We have much to discuss." Lasara followed Alara into the cottage, her heart filled with a mixture of awe and relief. The interior of the cottage was small but cozy, furnished with simple, handcrafted furniture, the walls adorned with tapestries depicting scenes of nature, of magic, of healing. The air was filled with the scent of herbs, of wood smoke, of home. Alara led Lasara to a table, where a pot of herbal tea was steaming, 2 cups waiting to be filled. They sat down, and Alara poured the tea, her movements graceful and deliberate. "Drink," she said. "It will calm your spirit, soothe your heart." Lasara drank the tea, the warm liquid spreading through her veins, easing her tension, calming her mind, filling her with a sense of peace. I don't understand," she said, her voice still trembling. What is this place? What am I doing here?" Alara smiled, her eyes twinkling with wisdom and kindness.
"This is a sanctuary," she said.
"A place of healing, a place of learning, a place of transformation. It is a place where those who have lost their way can find their path, where those who have suffered can find solace, where those who have sacrificed can find renewal." "And you?" Lasara asked. "Are you a spirit? A ghost?" Alara shook her head. "I am neither," she said. "And both. I am a guardian.
"A guide."
A teacher. I am here to help you, Lasara. To help you understand your purpose. To help you embrace your destiny." "My destiny?" Lasara repeated, her mind racing. "But I thought I had fulfilled my destiny. I broke the curse. I ended the war." Alara nodded.
"You did," she said.
"And you did it with courage, with strength, with love. But your journey is not over, Lasara. It is just beginning." "But what am I supposed to do?" Lasara asked, her voice filled with confusion and despair. I have nothing left. I lost everything." Alara reached out and gently took Lasara's hand, her touch sending a surge of warmth and energy through her veins. "You have not lost everything, Lasara," she said. "You have gained yourself. You have discovered your power. You have embraced your true nature." She looked at Lasara, her eyes filled with a love that was both profound and unconditional. "You are a healer, Lasara," she said. "A bridge between worlds. A force for good. You have a gift, a power, a purpose. And you are not alone." As she looked at her grandmother, a noise sounded at the door. Chapter 20. The Dawn of a New Era. The noise at the door, a soft but insistent knock, startled Lasara, breaking the spell of Alara's words, pulling her back from the brink of despair, reminding her of the world outside, the world she had left behind, the world she thought she could never rejoin. Alara smiled, her eyes twinkling with a knowing light. "It seems we have a visitor," she said. "Perhaps someone you know." Lasara's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could it possibly be Kalen? Alara rose and walked to the door, opening it to reveal Kalen. He stood there, his golden eyes searching the room, his gaze finally settling on Lasara, his face etched with a mixture of relief, hope, and love. He looked different, softer, gentler, more human, but still Kalen. "Lasara," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, his eyes filling with tears. I had to find you. I couldn't let you go." Lasara rose from her chair, her legs trembling, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to run to him, to embrace him, to feel his arms around her, to know that she wasn't alone, that she hadn't lost everything. But she hesitated, her mind filled with doubt, with fear, with the memory of their parting, of the broken bond, of the severed connection. "Kalen," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion.
"But how? Why?"
He stepped into the cottage, closing the door behind him, his gaze never leaving hers. "I followed the whispers," he said. They led me to you." He paused, his expression shifting, becoming more determined. "The curse is broken, Lasara," he said. "The werewolves are free." But something unexpected happened. Lasara frowned, her confusion growing. "What do you mean?" "The bond, it wasn't just severed," he said. "It transformed.
It changed.
It became something new." He took a step closer, his golden eyes searching hers, his voice filled with a hope that mirrored her own. "The werewolves, they are no longer bound to the moon," he said. "But they still retain some of their abilities. Their strength, their speed, their senses. And their connection to the forest, to nature, to each other." He paused, his gaze deepening, his voice becoming more intimate. "And my connection to you, Lasara," he said. "It didn't disappear. It evolved. It became something stronger, something deeper, something unbreakable." Lasara's heart soared. Could it be true? Could their love, their bond, have survived the ritual, have transformed into something new, something even more powerful? She looked at Alara, seeking confirmation, seeking guidance, seeking hope. Alara smiled, her eyes filled with a love that encompassed them both. The heart knows no boundaries, Lasara, she said. Love, true love, transcends all obstacles, all limitations, all curses. She gestured towards Kalen.
He speaks the truth, she said.
The bond between you, it has changed, but it has not been broken. It has evolved. It has become something new, something stronger, something eternal. Lasara turned back to Kalen, her tears flowing freely now, but tears of joy, of relief, of love. She ran to him, throwing her arms around him, burying her face in his chest, feeling his warmth, his strength, his love. He held her close, his arms tight around her, his heart beating in time with hers. He kissed her hair, her forehead, her lips. I love you, Lasara, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. I will always love you. And I love you, Kalen, she replied, her voice filled with a love that was both profound and eternal. They stood there, embraced, their hearts reunited, their love reborn, their future uncertain, but filled with hope, with possibility, with a new dawn. Alara watched them, her heart filled with joy, with peace, with fulfillment. Her promise had been kept, the curse had been broken, the war had ended, and love, true love, had prevailed. The future is yours, she said.
Create it well.
And in the quiet cottage, Lasara smiled. Epilogue. The years that followed were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the enduring power of love, and the transformative magic of hope. Lasara and Kalen, their bond reforged in the crucible of sacrifice and reborn in the dawn of a new era, built a life together that blended the best of both their worlds. Whispering Pines, no longer a hidden sanctuary for werewolves bound by a curse, became a thriving community where humans and those who retained the gifts of the Hollow Fong lived side by side, in harmony and mutual respect. The werewolves, freed from the forced transformations and the primal urges of the Blood Moon, embraced their newfound humanity while cherishing the unique abilities that remained, their enhanced strength, their heightened senses, their deep connection to the forest. Lasara, with Alara's guidance and Kalen's unwavering support, continued to hone her skills as a healer, a bridge between worlds, a force for good. She established a center for healing in the heart of Whispering Pines, drawing on both her knowledge of herbal remedies and the ancient magic of the Hollow Fong to help those in need, both human and werewolf alike. Kalen, no longer burdened by the curse and the responsibilities of an alpha, discovered a new purpose in leading his people towards a future of peace and prosperity. He worked tirelessly to build bridges with the surrounding human communities, fostering understanding, cooperation, and trust. He became a symbol of hope, a testament to the possibility of overcoming prejudice, hatred, and fear. The hunters, their ranks decimated and their dark magic dispelled, faded into obscurity, their legacy a reminder of the dangers of ignorance and intolerance. Bastion, stripped of his power and his purpose, vanished into the shadows, his fate unknown, his name a whispered curse in the annals of history. Lasara and Kalen, though they never had children of their own, became surrogate parents to the entire community, their love and guidance shaping the lives of generations to come. They taught the young ones the importance of balance, of respecting both the human and the wolf within, of embracing the power of love, of forgiveness, of hope. Alara, her task completed, her promise fulfilled, eventually faded from the physical realm, her spirit returning to the ancient forest, becoming one with the whispers, the trees, the magic that permeated the land. But her presence remained, a guiding light, a source of wisdom, a constant reminder of the power of love and sacrifice. As the years turned into decades, Lasara and Kalen grew old together, their love deepening with each passing season, their bond unbreakable, their spirits intertwined. They watched the world change around them, Witnessing the slow but steady healing of the rift between humans and werewolves, the gradual acceptance of the different, the dawn of a new era. One evening, as the sun set, casting a golden glow over the valley of whispering pines, Lasara and Kaelin sat on the porch of their small cottage, hand in hand, their hearts filled with peace, with gratitude, with love. Lasara, her silver hair shining in the fading light, her blue eyes twinkling with wisdom and kindness, looked at Kaelin, his golden eyes still filled with the love that had sustained them through the trials and tribulations of their lives. "We did it, Kaelin," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. We created a better world." Kaelin smiled, his hand squeezing hers, his heart overflowing with love for this extraordinary woman, his soulmate, his everything. "We did it together, Lasara," he replied, his voice filled with a love that transcended time, space, and even death. They sat in silence, watching the stars emerge, their hearts content, their spirits at peace, their love eternal. And as the moon rose, full and bright, casting its silvery glow over the land, they knew that their journey was complete, their legacy secure, their love a beacon of hope for generations to come. They leaned in close and kissed.